invitation. No one expected. The private jet hummed softly as it sliced through the cloudless sky, making its way across the Pacific. Sundar Pichai sat quietly, staring out the small oval window. He was calm, composed, yet his mind was processing 1,000 calculations all at once. The invitation had come as a surprise. A handwritten letter delivered by a private courier, embossed with gold initials and sealed with an insignia known only to the elite, the Summit of Titans. Every year, a secretive gathering of the world's most powerful billionaires took place at an undisclosed location. These weren't just corporate leaders. They were the puppeteers behind industries: energy, defense, finance, pharmaceuticals, technology, and governments themselves. And this year, for the first time ever, Sundar Pichai had been invited. COB. Hidden agenda. The irony wasn't lost on Sundar. Although he was one of the most influential tech CEOs globally, he was often perceived as the quiet one. The man who didn't boast, didn't flaunt wealth, and rarely made headlines for scandal or controversy. In a world where ego often outshone substance, Sundar was an anomaly. Some in the media speculated that his invitation was an acknowledgement of his growing influence. Others whispered that it was a trap. There were rumors that several powerful factions in the world of old money were uncomfortable with how technology was shifting the global balance of power. They saw Sundar's leadership at Google and his quiet expansion into AI, healthcare, education, and renewable energy as a threat. He was democratizing knowledge, breaking monopolies, and empowering ordinary people. That was dangerous. The billionaires, gathered at the Summit of Titans, weren't accustomed to competition that didn't play by their rules. The arrival as the jet descended onto a private island somewhere in the South Pacific, Sundar's heart remained steady. Waiting for him was a convoy of black armored vehicles, their drivers expressionless in matching black suits. The air smelled of salt, power, and money. He was escorted into a towering glass building overlooking the turquoise sea. Inside, the atmosphere was like something out of a Bond movie, sleek, cold, futuristic. He recognized some faces instantly. Gregory Hawthorne, the energy tycoon who controlled over 30% of the world's oil reserves. Elena Volkova, the queen of pharmaceuticals with patents that governed life-saving medicines. Victor Carlyle, the hedge fund king whose whispers could collapse currencies overnight. Richard Cavendish, head of the world's most secretive defense contractor. And dozens more, each worth tens of billions, each with private armies of lawyers, lobbyists, and politicians. They glanced at Sundar as he entered. Polite nods, cold smiles. They saw him as a newcomer, a guest, possibly a threat, but mostly someone they could still control. The first test dinner that evening was held in a domed glass hall under the stars. The mood was informal, but every word carried hidden meanings. The conversations weren't about hobbies or personal anecdotes. They were chess moves. Mr. Pichai. Gregory Hawthorne leaned forward, his voice oozing condescension. You've done well with Google, no doubt. But tell me, do you really believe artificial intelligence will save the world? Isn't it more likely to enslave it? A few billionaires chuckled softly. Victor Carlyle added with a smirk. After all, most people aren't intelligent enough to handle AI. Shouldn't such power be managed by people who understand its risks, like us? The others nodded approvingly. This was the first move. Test his ideals. Probe his weakness. Sundar took a sip of water, then looked directly at the circle of billionaires. Power, Sundar began softly, has always been dangerous in the wrong hands. That's why I believe in decentralizing access. The farmer in Kenya deserves the same AI tools as the CEO in New York. The schoolgirl in India should have the same educational resources as the prince in London. He paused, letting his words settle. That is the future we are building. The room fell silent for a moment. Victor's smirk faded. Gregory's eyes narrowed. This was not the meek, diplomatic Sundar they had expected. The hidden camera, unbeknownst to Sundar, the entire conversation was being monitored. In a secured room nearby, A private council of the most powerful billionaires was watching. "He's more dangerous than we thought," whispered one. "We need to neutralize him before his vision spreads," said another. "Wait," said Elena Volkova calmly. "Let him speak tomorrow at the forum. The others will see. We don't need to destroy him. We'll let him destroy himself." The others agreed. Tomorrow, Sundar would be placed at the center of the arena, the open forum where his ideas would be challenged, attacked, and ridiculed by some of the sharpest, most ruthless minds on earth. If he faltered, it would end his credibility. A quiet call. That night, Sundar sat alone in his minimalist suite. The moonlight spilled across the polished floor. His phone vibrated softly. It was a secure call from his trusted advisor, Priya, back at Google headquarters. "They're setting you up, Sundar," she warned. "We've intercepted chatter. Tomorrow's session won't be a debate. It's an ambush." Sundar listened quietly. "Do you want me to alert the board? We can issue statements, release PR responses, prepare damage control." "No," Sundar interrupted gently. "If they want an arena, we'll give them one. But not on their terms." He stood by the window, staring out into the vast, dark sea. "Priya," he said calmly, "tomorrow, we don't defend ourselves. Tomorrow, we redefine who holds real power." The calm, before the storm as dawn approached, the entire island buzzed with anticipation. The billionaires smelled blood. They believed that Sundar Pichai's humility would crumble under their intellectual assault, that his vision of democratizing power would be exposed as naive. They were wrong. What none of them understood was that Sundar Pichai's strength did not come from ego or dominance. It came from understanding something they never did. The true purpose of leadership is not to own the future, but to serve it. And tomorrow, the world would watch as everything they believed about power, control, and influence would begin to unravel. The billionaires' arena, the morning sun rose over the island like an indifferent observer to the unfolding storm. The open forum wasn't just a debate stage, it was a modern-day coliseum. Billionaires didn't draw blood with swords. They wielded words, data, influence, and psychological traps. Inside the enormous hall, cameras were positioned discreetly. Though it was a closed event, live feeds were being watched by global power brokers, secret societies, heads of state, and private investors scattered across the world. This was where reputations were either immortalized or annihilated. Sundar Pichai walked in calmly, wearing a simple navy suit, understated compared to the others around him. No loud jewelry, no security entourage, no displays of excess. His composure was unsettling for those who expected nervousness. At the center of the marble stage was a round table. Seated there were 9 of the wealthiest individuals alive. They called themselves the Circle. Gregory Hawthorne, Elena Volkova, Victor Carlyle, Richard Cavendish, and 5 others whose names rarely reached the public, but whose fingerprints were on nearly every major financial, military, and technological event on the planet. The audience, comprised of several dozen billionaires, watched with cold fascination. Opening the game. The moderator, a silver-haired former diplomat named Edward Kingsley, began the session with a thin smile. "Mr. Pichai, you've been invited today because your growing influence in global technology cannot be ignored. But many here have concerns about your idealism." Laughter rippled through the room. "We want to hear your answers. But be prepared," Kingsley continued. "These questions will be direct. This room does not tolerate rehearsed speeches." Sundar simply nodded. Edward gestured to Gregory Hawthorne to begin. "The oil tycoon strikes." Gregory leaned forward, his steely blue eyes locked on Sundar. "You speak of renewable energy, AI-powered optimization, and replacing fossil fuels. That sounds noble. But let's be honest. You're threatening the livelihoods of millions who depend on these industries. Entire economies would collapse. Oil powers infrastructure, defense, and even your beloved data centers." He smiled as if cornering a student in a classroom debate. "So tell us, Mr. Pichai, Are you prepared to bankrupt entire nations to chase your vision of clean energy? The audience murmured approvingly. Sundar responded without raising his voice. I don't seek to bankrupt nations, Gregory. I seek to future-proof them. Clinging to oil is like refusing to adopt the printing press because scribes will lose work. He paused. The nations that lead in renewables will dominate future markets. Solar, wind, and fusion technologies create new industries, new jobs, and reduce catastrophic environmental costs that, ironically, your children's children will have to pay for if we continue down your road. He let that hang in the air. The question isn't whether we can afford to change. The question is, can we afford not to? The first crack appeared in Gregory's confident smirk. The hedge fund trap next was Victor Carlyle. You speak of open AI, Sundar, of making tools available to everyone. But democratizing AI means handing weapons to untrained masses. Misused algorithms could destabilize financial markets overnight, collapse currencies, and allow rogue actors to exploit vulnerabilities. Victor's voice carried the condescending weight of a seasoned predator. You might trust humanity. I trust numbers. And they say this will lead to chaos. The crowd nodded. This was one of their strongest arguments. But Sundar simply smiled. Victor, you speak as though gatekeeping power has worked, yet inequality grows. Markets crash under manipulative practices, and ordinary people suffer while a few grow richer. He shifted in his seat slightly, his tone still respectful but firm. Yes, AI in the wrong hands is dangerous. But keeping it locked in ivory towers doesn't prevent abuse, it ensures it. The solution isn't control, it's education, transparency, and global cooperation. He looked directly at Victor. Fear of misuse is not a reason to halt progress. It's a reason to build responsibly, together. Victor's face twitched slightly, but he remained silent. The pharmaceutical queen enters. Elena Volkova, elegant and deadly, spoke next. You believe in disrupting healthcare. AI-powered diagnostics, cheap drug manufacturing, open-source medical algorithms. But drug development costs billions. Without profit incentives, who funds research? Do you plan to give away medicine for free, Mr. Pichai? Charity doesn't sustain innovation. There was a brief silence after her words, a well-delivered strike. But Sundar was ready. Profit is not evil, Elena, but extortion is. When life-saving, medications cost 500% more in one country than another, we're not funding research, we're funding yachts. There were gasps and murmurs. The innovation you speak of? Much of it is already funded by public grants, taxpayer money, and university labs, yet the end products are priced beyond reach. What I propose isn't charity, it's balance. He looked across the entire table now. When innovation serves humanity first, profits follow naturally. Sustainable models exist. What's missing is the will. The defense contractor's ultimatum. Richard Cavendish spoke, his voice heavy with unspoken threats. Open technologies weaken national defense. Your global AI cooperation opens backdoors for espionage. Defense is about control, controlled information, controlled access. He paused. You may not respect these realities now, but you will when the first mass casualty happens, because your open-source idealism gave terrorists tools they were never supposed to have. The room grew tense. Even some audience members shifted uncomfortably. Sundar's response came slower, more deliberate. Richard, defense is critical, but absolute control breeds tyranny. The same argument was made when the internet was born, that it would empower only criminals. Yet here, we are. The internet empowers doctors, teachers, farmers, and families. He leaned forward for the first time. The solution to bad actors is not hoarding knowledge, but outpacing them with better innovation, stronger safeguards, and global transparency. He locked eyes with Cavendish. The real danger isn't open access. It's when power is hidden, concentrated, and unaccountable, like your private defense contracts. For a brief moment, the room fell completely silent. The circle grows uneasy. The billionaires around the table began to exchange glances. This was not going according to plan. Sundar wasn't defensive. He wasn't combative, he was dismantling their narratives one by one with calm logic. But worse, he was exposing their motives. The surprise challenger. Suddenly, from the back of the room, a voice spoke. It belonged to Emmanuel Devereux, the secret chairman of the Summit of Titans, the man who rarely spoke publicly, who many believed was the true kingmaker behind global policy shifts. He stepped forward, microphone in hand. "Mr. Pichai," he said softly, "you've shown courage. But courage is not enough to lead this world." He circled Sundar like a panther. "You are naive if you believe humanity, left to its own devices, will not implode. You are proposing open AI, democratized medicine, decentralized finance, renewable energy. You are proposing to dismantle the very architecture that has held civilization together for centuries." He smiled faintly. "If you tear down the old world, what guarantee can you offer that the new one won't be far worse?" The entire room held its breath. This was the true test. The defining moment. Sundar stood. He did not raise his voice, but his words filled the room with the weight of truth. "I offer no guarantees, Mr. Devereux, because guarantees belong to dictators and gods." He paused, scanning the faces before him. "But what I offer is the courage to trust human potential again, to replace control with collaboration, fear with hope, profit with purpose. I believe in building systems that evolve, adapt, and remain accountable, not ones frozen by the interests of a few." His voice grew stronger now. "We don't fear change because it's dangerous. We fear it because it threatens privilege." He pointed subtly toward the circle. "The old world survives because people like you believe only you are fit to govern. But the future belongs to those unafraid to share power." The room erupted into whispers, shifting, and private conversations. A few even clapped quietly. For the first time, the circle saw what they truly feared. Not Sundar's ambition, his ideas. Behind the curtains, in a secured room nearby, analysts and intelligence operatives watching the live feed exchanged rapid reports. "We may have underestimated him. Public sentiment online is surging in his favor. Some members are turning. The equilibrium of global power had begun to tilt, not with war, not with sabotage, with words. The power shift begins." The island buzzed like a beehive disturbed. What was meant to be Sundar Pichai's public humiliation had slowly transformed into something none of the billionaires had predicted, a silent, dangerous shift in influence. The private feeds broadcasting the Summit of Titans were now being analyzed by thousands of secret advisors, financial boards, defense ministries, think tanks, and intelligence agencies worldwide. In just one session, Sundar hadn't simply defended himself, he had exposed them. The morning after. The following morning, the circle convened privately. The mood was dark. Gregory Hawthorne slammed his glass on the marble table. "He's more dangerous than I imagined." Victor Carlyle rubbed his temples. He didn't debate. He reframed the entire argument. Elena Volkova, always the calmest, spoke softly. "The problem is not just him. It's his philosophy. If this spreads, our hold weakens. We need a new approach." Emmanuel Devereux sat silently, observing them all. Then for the first time since the forum he spoke. "Not yet." The others turned toward him. "We tried humiliation. It failed. But now we try the more subtle weapon. Temptation." The secret meeting, later that afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, a private invitation was slipped under Sundar's door. "Mr. Pichai, you have earned the respect of the circle. Join us for a confidential session tonight. Only 10 will attend." E.D. Sundar read it carefully. Priya, calling in via encrypted satellite phone, was instantly alarmed when Sundar mentioned it. "It's a trap, Sundar. They've shifted strategies." "I know," he replied calmly. "Then why go?" Sundar smiled faintly. "Because this is where the real game begins." Inside the vault that night, Sundar entered a subterranean chamber beneath the main complex. It was cold, circular, lined with ancient marble and modern surveillance tech, a fusion of old empire and new empire. Only 10 men and women sat around the obsidian table. No cameras, no public broadcasts, no audience. This was where real decisions were made. Devereaux leaned forward. Mr. Pichai, you have earned our admiration. Few have stood against us as you did, but your talents are wasted on ideals. Sundar remained silent. Devereaux continued. You control the most sophisticated AI network in history. Imagine what you could accomplish if unshackled from government oversight, public shareholders, and regulators. He gestured toward the others. We offer you full membership into the circle. Total autonomy, infinite resources, no restrictions. Gregory added, with us you could achieve things your boardroom at Google would never allow. Victor smirked. Join us, Sundar. Rule beside us. The room fell silent, awaiting his response. The poisonous offer. Sundar looked around the table. He saw their brilliance. Their intelligence was undeniable. These were not cartoon villains. They were masters of strategy, power, and manipulation. But their fatal flaw was always the same. They saw people as assets, data points, numbers. Sundar spoke slowly. You offer me power beyond measure. But at what cost? Complicity in your model of control? Trading transparency for secrecy? Trading humanity for efficiency? He paused, letting his words pierce the still air. True leadership isn't measured by how many you rule. It's measured by how many you serve. The final card. Devereaux's face remained unreadable. You misunderstand. This is not about control, Mr. Pichai. This is about inevitability. He snapped his fingers. A large screen lit up behind them. Files, graphs, and surveillance footage began to scroll. Private emails, internal discussions at Google, global economic trends, political blackmail. They had dossiers on everything, including Sundar's own executives, board members, and personal contacts. Devereaux spoke softly. May refuse us, but your company is vulnerable. Governments can be manipulated, markets can be moved. Discrediting you would take days. Sundar's pulse remained steady. This was their final weapon. Fear. The turn. For a long moment, Sundar said nothing. Then, calmly he reached into his pocket and placed a small encrypted drive on the table. You're not the only ones who prepare. He gestured toward the drive. In the past 2 years, we've developed decentralized AI oversight protocols, publicly verifiable, independently managed. If anything happens to me or my team, this network activates automatically, releasing full transparency reports on every corporation in this room. A few gasped. Victor's face darkened. You're bluffing. Sundar simply smiled. You can gamble on that if you like. He stood up. The world doesn't belong to you anymore. Then slowly, deliberately, Sundar Pichai left the chamber, leaving the circle staring at one another, for the first time unsure of their next move. The shockwave. Within 24 hours, whispers of what transpired leaked out. Independent journalists began releasing hints of the circle's failed intimidation attempt. Financial markets trembled. Political leaders quietly reached out to Google, offering support. Suddenly, Sundar Pichai wasn't just a tech CEO anymore. He had become a global symbol of resistance against consolidated power. News anchors debated it. Podcasts exploded with discussions. Twitter trended globally with the Pichai stand in universities, in developing nations, in grassroots organizations. Ordinary people saw him as something rare, a leader who didn't sell out. The circle fractures inside. The circle. Panic began to spread. We've underestimated him, Elena finally admitted. Worse, Victor added. We've created a legend. Some members now began questioning the circle's very existence. Devereaux, however, remained composed. We forced his hand too early. He turned to his remaining loyalists. There will be no more offers, no more debates. He stood slowly. Now, we break him. The retaliation. 48 hours later. The storm begins. The media frenzy surrounding Sundar Pichai had reached levels no one anticipated. In less than 2 days, global support poured in from unexpected places: young tech innovators, university professors, small startup founders, even policymakers in struggling nations. He wasn't just a CEO anymore. He was becoming a movement, and the circle had never faced anything like this before. The silent retaliation plan. Inside a heavily encrypted boardroom, somewhere in Switzerland, the circle's core members gathered again. This time there was no debate, no politics, no diplomacy. This was war. Emmanuel Devereux spoke first, his voice cold and surgical. He made his choice. Now we make ours. Victor Carlyle activated a holographic map of Sundar's global network: subsidiaries, partnerships, government relations, personal contacts. Gregory Hawthorne spoke. We hit him on 3 levels: corporate, personal, and global reputation. They called it Project Eclipse, the total dismantling of Sundar Pichai's empire. Phase 1. Corporate sabotage within hours. Regulatory bodies in several countries suddenly launched surprise investigations against Google subsidiaries. Old lawsuits that had long been dismissed were mysteriously reopened. Key contracts were canceled under mysterious security concerns. Confidential trade documents were leaked to the press, many doctored to suggest monopolistic abuse. Within 24 hours, Google's stock saw its sharpest fall in 15 years. News headlines blared: Has Pichai overreached? The fall of a tech messiah? Senate demands emergency hearings on AI security breaches. This was no longer chess. This was financial assassination. Phase 2, personal attack next. They went after Sundar's personal integrity. A fabricated scandal emerged, accusing him of insider trading. False whistleblowers were planted. Carefully edited videos began circulating online, designed to make him appear arrogant, detached, and reckless. Old business contacts were bribed to give interviews painting Sundar as a man obsessed with power. Even Priya, his most loyal advisor, received mysterious threats. Her family's personal accounts were hacked, their photos posted on anonymous dark web forums. Back away, Priya, or lose everything. The circle wanted fear to do the rest. Phase 3. Global pressure. At the United Nations Technology Summit just weeks away, the circle began pulling strings to orchestrate a vote condemning Google's AI expansion as a global security risk. If passed, it would destroy Sundar's AI vision completely. Devereux smiled as the pieces fell into place. Let him drown in his own vision. The lonely leader inside Google headquarters, Sundar stood before his closest team. The mood was grim. Financial loss. Reputation attacked, family members threatened. He had known this was coming, but even Sundar, with all his foresight, could feel the crushing weight of the silent war now aimed at him. Sir, Priya said softly, we may not survive this. Sundar closed his eyes briefly. He was exhausted but not broken. He opened his eyes and calmly said, then we evolve. The strategic counter Sundar made a move that caught even the circle off guard. Instead of hiding, he called a global press conference. The world watched as he stepped onto the stage. No teleprompter, no script. For the past 72 hours, a campaign of disinformation, sabotage, and fear has been unleashed against not just me, but against anyone who believes in open progress. This isn't about one man. It's about the right to imagine a future where knowledge isn't controlled by a few. He paused, letting the words settle into billions of hearts watching live. The attacks will continue, but I will not negotiate with fear, nor should you. The power of transparency. Then came the masterstroke. Sundar's team had quietly assembled a transparency archive, a fully decentralized, blockchain-verified database that publicly exposed every move the circle had made during Project Eclipse, every backdoor meeting, every fabricated story, every bribed official. Within hours, journalists worldwide began dissecting the documents. Hashtags exploded globally. Karen expose, The Circle, Digital Freedom, Sundar Pichai. Unbroken whistleblowers who were once too afraid began coming forward. Suddenly, some of the world's most powerful billionaires found themselves facing public scrutiny like never before. The unexpected ally. That night, Sundar received a call. On the other end was President Maria Sanchez of Costa Nueva, one of the smaller nations, previously bullied by the Circle. Her voice was firm. "We've read the archive, Mr. Pichai. My nation stands with you." And so do several others. Within hours, over a dozen smaller countries publicly pledged support to Sundar's global AI transparency model. This was not just about big tech anymore. It had become a global human rights movement. The Circle fractures further inside. The Circle's hidden headquarters, chaos reigned. Victor Carlyle lost $3 billion in 1 week. Elena Volkova's pharmaceutical stock collapsed. Gregory Hawthorne's offshore accounts were subpoenaed. Worse, some of their own junior members secretly contacted Sundar's team, offering evidence. In exchange for immunity, even among the Circle, fear was spreading. "We need to stop this before we lose control," Victor hissed. Devereaux, however, remained calm. "No, now we change tactics. If we can't break him politically, we break him emotionally." The ultimate threat. 3 days later, Priya rushed into Sundar's office, her face pale. "They've crossed the final line, Sundar." She handed him a secure tablet. On the screen was live drone footage of his childhood village in India. Men in black SUVs had arrived. His extended family members were being monitored, threatened, leveraged. The message was simple: end your crusade, or they suffer. For the first time, Sundar Pichai felt true dread. They had left his world of logic. Now they were attacking his soul. The ethical dilemma alone that night. Sundar sat in silent torment. He knew what was at stake. If he backed down, billions would remain under the Circle's silent rule. If he continued, innocent lives could be destroyed. This was the Circle's final weapon. His mind replayed his father's words from years ago. "True courage, my son, is not doing what is safe. It is doing what is right, even when the cost breaks your heart." The price of leadership. The breaking point. The air inside Sundar's private suite was still suffocating. For hours he sat alone, eyes locked on the tablet screen replaying the live drone footage from his childhood village. Every corner of his heart screamed at him, not for himself, for them, his uncles, his aunts, his cousins. Children who ran barefoot through the same dirt streets where he once dreamed under starlit skies. They were innocent. And now, pawns in the Circle's most ruthless move yet. Priya sat nearby, silent. She had never seen Sundar like this. His usually calm eyes were heavy. His fingers trembled slightly. A man holding the weight of billions of lives and his own family's safety. The private call that night, Sundar received a direct video call from Emmanuel Devereaux. Devereaux's face filled, the screen smooth and calm as always. "It didn't have to be like this, Mr. Pichai, but you forced our hand." Sundar clenched his jaw but remained silent. "You see now, there are limits even to your resolve. Surrender the transparency archives. Terminate your AI initiative. Publicly resign, do that, and your family remains unharmed." The words were delivered like ice. Devereaux smiled faintly. "This isn't about who's right or wrong. It's about who's willing to pay the price." The screen went black. The Council of Conscience Priya spoke softly once Devereaux disappeared. "We can call global security agencies. We can move your family under protection." But Sundar shook his head. "You know they have reach far beyond the law." Silence fell again. Priya finally whispered, "Then maybe it's time to walk away." It was the first time she had ever suggested surrender. The message from the village. The next morning, an encrypted message arrived from Sundar's cousin, Arun, in the village. It was short. "We are not afraid, brother. We are proud of you. We believe in what you're fighting for. If we fall, at least let us fall for something that matters." Sundar's throat tightened. These were the people he had always tried to uplift. Their courage made his wealth feel meaningless. We believe in, the hidden alliance, unbeknownst to the circle. Priya had quietly mobilized an unexpected network, an underground coalition of rogue journalists, ethical hackers, and ex-intelligence agents, people who had quietly admired Sundar's mission from afar. They called themselves the Architects. Their leader, a former MI6 operative named Lucian Vale, spoke directly to Sundar via a secure link. You may not have asked for war, Mr. Pichai, but war has found you. We cannot stop the circle directly, but we can expose them. Lucian revealed they had infiltrated portions of the circle's data cores. They had evidence, assassination plots, rigged elections, economic manipulations, blackmail operations against world leaders. With your permission, Lucian said, we can release this information to independent international courts, UN bodies, and global citizen platforms. It won't erase the danger, but it will make it harder for them to operate in the shadows. Sundar stared at the screen. Do it. The unveiling what followed was the largest coordinated global leak since the dawn of the internet. Overnight, major world leaders were exposed for colluding with the circle. Financial fraud worth trillions was uncovered. Human rights abuses, linked to the circle's shadow operations, shocked the world. Headlines dominated every media channel. The secret billionaire cabal exposed. Evidence of global manipulation surfaces. The Pichai leaks ignite global uprising. The global uprising within 72 hours. Millions took to the streets across dozens of nations. Multiple governments collapsed under citizen revolts. International courts issued arrest warrants for key circle members. Free press networks worked day and night, analyzing every document, every file, every name. A worldwide alliance of nations began forming. Smaller countries who, for years, had been victimized by the circle's economic dominance. They called themselves the new consortium of sovereigns. For the first time in modern history, the people had cornered the untouchable elite. The desperate retaliation. The circle was hemorrhaging. Victor Carlyle's hedge fund empire filed bankruptcy. Gregory Hawthorne's oil conglomerate was sanctioned. Internationally, Elena Volkova was stripped from her pharmaceutical board positions after mass protests. But Devereaux was not finished. Cornered, he turned fully ruthless. Activate protocol blackout. It was the circle's nuclear option, destabilizing. Global internet infrastructure. Within minutes, banking networks froze. Global communications stuttered. Energy grids in select regions were disrupted. Panic rippled through stock markets, transportation systems, and government servers. The digital battle. This was where Sundar's real war began, not against people, but against data. Google's quantum teams, led by Priya and Lucian's architects, had prepared for this possibility. For 48 hours, the world watched the largest digital confrontation ever seen. Firewalls collapsing, systems rebooting, counterattacks flying across continents. It wasn't just Sundar's battle anymore. Global citizens, coders, ethical hackers, students, professors, cybersecurity experts joined him online. A global army of ordinary people fought side by side, with one goal: keep the light on. The miracle at hour 49:08, exactly the 49th hour. Something extraordinary happened. The decentralized AI network Sundar had secretly designed years prior, called Project Lumen, activated fully. Lumen wasn't just a backup system. It was a living, learning AI model that autonomously protected the Internet's core infrastructure using decentralized, encrypted nodes that the circle couldn't trace or shut down. Suddenly, banking systems recovered. Power grids stabilized. Communication networks restored. The digital blackout failed, and with that, the circle's last weapon crumbled. The personal victory at sunrise. Sundar received a final encrypted message from his cousin Arun. It was a simple video clip. The children of the village holding up handmade signs that read, "We are free." Sundar finally allowed tears to roll down his face. It wasn't victory that moved him. It was the fact that they endured. And now, The world had witnessed something greater than any single man's legacy, a revolution born from ideas, not guns. The new dawn 1 week later, the world awakes. The world didn't just change overnight, it was reborn. For the first time in modern history, global power was no longer dictated solely by boardrooms, oil fields, and shadowy political networks. Instead, a new balance had emerged, driven by transparency, accountability, and millions of ordinary people who had refused to sit silent. The circle was broken. The aftermath of the circle. Victor Carlyle was arrested in Switzerland under international finance conspiracy charges. Gregory Hawthorne faced war crime investigations for decades of illegal oil-funded conflicts. Elena Volkova was tried by the International Criminal Court for price-gouging life-saving medicines across impoverished nations. Other members fled into hiding, their wealth frozen, their influence shattered, but the most elusive, Emmanuel Devereux, had disappeared completely. Some believed he was captured, others whispered that he had vanished into one of his private fortified islands. Only Sundar knew. The world had moved beyond men like Devereux. The unexpected Cologne evening, as Sundar sat on his balcony overlooking the Pacific, his secure phone buzzed. The call was untraceable. He answered calmly. Devereux's voice came through low but clear. "You've won. For now." Sundar said nothing. "But know this, Pichai. Power doesn't die. It waits. And one day people will forget what you've done here." Sundar finally spoke. "Perhaps, but today, billions remembered who truly owns the future." There was a brief silence before Devereux ended the call with 4 chilling words. "Enjoy your brief victory." The global transformation in the months that followed. The new consortium of sovereigns expanded to include over 60 nations, establishing a global charter for digital ethics and technological transparency. Google's decentralized AI oversight council became fully operational, no longer owned by any corporation but managed by independent public representatives worldwide. The Project Lumen network secured vital global infrastructures from monopolistic control. Education platforms powered by OpenAI spread across developing nations, offering free world-class education to millions of children. What had started as one man's resistance became a global reformation. The people remembered from the streets. Of Nairobi to the villages of Southeast Asia, people whispered Sundar's name, not as a tech mogul but as a symbol of what leadership should mean: service, not control. Countless murals appeared across cities, showing Sundar's silhouette beneath words that captured the soul of his fight. The future belongs to all. The personal return. But for Sundar, the most meaningful journey was still personal. Months after the battle, he quietly returned to his childhood village in India, unannounced, no cameras, no media. He walked barefoot through the same streets where his young self had once chased fireflies under the stars. His cousin Arun greeted him with open arms. "You kept your promise, brother." Children ran up laughing, handing him hand-drawn cards filled with hearts, stars, and words like, "Thank you, Uncle Sundar." His eyes filled with tears, humbled beyond words. The quiet ceremony, the villagers gathered, under a banyan tree where elders had long held community discussions. That evening they held a simple ceremony. There were no grand speeches. Just an elderly woman, once his childhood schoolteacher, who placed her frail hand on Sundar's shoulder and said, "You remembered where you came from, and because of that, you gave us back our voice." The final reflection, months later during an international interview, a journalist asked Sundar, "You faced unspeakable threats. You risked your family, your company, your own safety. Was it worth it?" Sundar smiled softly and answered, "True leadership isn't measured by what you gain, but by what you're willing to give away so others may rise." He paused. "I didn't fight for power. I fought to remind us all. The future must belong to those still waiting for their first chance. The legacy begins in the years that followed. Universities began teaching the Pichai Doctrine as a case study on ethical leadership in the 21st century. Books were written, documentaries were filmed, new global policies were drafted, but Sundar himself never returned to power. He quietly stepped back from corporate leadership, choosing instead to mentor future leaders, teach, and quietly fund projects that empowered the next generation of problem solvers. He had done his part. The rest was no longer his story, but the world's. The closing image in one, now famous viral photograph, Sundar stands beneath that same banyan tree where it all began. No bodyguards, no luxury cars, just children gathered around him, smiling as he reads them stories beneath the stars. That image became a symbol, not of power, but of purpose.